What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Trey Jones. Today I'm going to be giving you 20 signs that you could possibly have health anxiety, otherwise known as hypochondria. Lately, the term most commonly used is health anxiety. But it is very, very important, guys. If you show any of these signs that I'm about to go over, okay, there's 20 of them, make sure that you talk to a mental health professional and get the ball rolling, okay? It's good to start somewhere. A diagnosis is a perfect place to start, okay? Usually they diagnose people with health anxiety or hypochondria with GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder. I'm hoping one day health anxiety can get its own category, its own diagnosis, right? Because it's a whole different breed. It's very complex. We feel isolated. We feel alone. We feel like we're losing our freaking mind. I know I certainly did. I know many of you are. Hopefully this video can bring some awareness to health anxiety. Hopefully it makes some of you feel less alone. And I know that was, like I said, that was a big deal for me. When I first started putting videos on this channel years and years ago, I started to share some of my experiences. I was getting closer to recovery at that point, but just sharing information and seeing that I wasn't alone on a deeper level, like it really catapulted my recovery. So if you can get that from this video, I say that that's a success. But, you know, quick disclaimer, I'm not a mental health professional. You need to go get that proper diagnosis and move forward from there. But guys, if you're new here, we like to start the video out with smashing that like button down below if you're ready to kick anxiety in the butt. Now leave me a comment, guys. And this isn't just for me, this is for everybody. Share your stories. You can talk about your symptoms if you'd like to make yourself feel less alone. If you have any of these signs, share them down below. This is a lengthy video, but it's worth it. You want to make sure that you watch all the way to the end. The 20th one is the best one. And then I have a bonus sign at the end. I know it sounds kind of weird, right? A bonus sign, you have health anxiety. But that's at the very end of this video, so stick around for that. The description box is loaded with material, my tips on anxiety. This isn't, you know, those tips are for other forms of anxiety, including panic attacks, social anxiety, etc. Also, therapy, like you need to get diagnosed. There's a link for online therapy down below. And guys, I went through health anxiety for 5 years, okay? That last year was a recovery. I know what it's like to feel like this, and I overcame it. So for many of you, recovery can be possible, okay? So I do coaching for this, especially with health anxiety. That's my bread and butter, and panic attacks. I overcame both of those issues. So if you're interested in coaching, my email is down below. Now let's get into this video, guys. We're gonna start with number 1. And this is like, you know, like everybody does this with health anxiety, at least in the beginning. You Google your symptoms obsessively. I'm not talking about an occasional Google search here. In the beginning, you Google your symptoms like crazy. I never got done Googling my symptoms and was like, whew, thank God that I'm okay. It was always like, oh my God, I had this disease, now I had this disease. There were many times whenever I would go in thinking I had one disease. For instance, in the beginning, I really feared heart disease, right? I thought I was having heart problems. I thought my panic attacks were heart attacks, right? I thought there was some issue with my heart. I had cardiophobia. So I would go in and search that stuff, and then I'd be like, oh my God, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's cancer, you know? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So I would go in thinking I had one disease, come out thinking I had 5. Also, you got to understand, you are at this point probably already negatively wired, okay? Which means you're wired to negativity. Obviously, your symptoms have gotten so bad because the anxiety has gone on for so long and it's been unresolved. So now that you're wired to negativity, you go to Google, you're going to believe the worst crap that you see, okay? And the worst disease, the dangerous stuff, the stuff that sells, it's at the top. So it's the first thing you see. So if you're wired to negativity, you have a negative way of thinking, you see the glass half empty, and you have symptoms, and then you see that these symptoms can be associated with heart disease or cancer or some other neurological disease, some degenerative disease, you're going to couple yourself with that automatically. That's going to happen in the beginning. And unfortunately, I think so many people could be spared of health anxiety if they just wouldn't have Googled their symptoms. Maybe Googling their symptoms early on in their life wasn't a big deal. I think positive people can Google their symptoms without freaking out. But if you are wired to negativity, now Googling becomes a huge issue, and it's driving health anxiety home, I think, for a lot of people. That's how it happened with me. My first panic attack lasted 6 hours, Googled it, saw that these symptoms were symptoms of a heart attack as well. For the next 2.5 years, I primarily worried about heart disease before moving on and graduating to other diseases. So do not Google your symptoms. It is not good. It is also external reassurance. If you have a hard time trusting the doctor, why are you going to trust a positive article that says it's anxiety? So I'm going to move on from that one. Stop Googling your symptoms. You'll start to feel better immediately. The next one, guys, is you constantly go to the doctor, the ER, hospital, etc. You're constantly needing that type of reassurance. Now, in the beginning, I had an issue with being nervous to go to the doctor. I was scared of going to the doctor. I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. But eventually, I got over that, and it was like I was desperate, so I was going. So if you're going all the time, you're getting told that you're healthy, and that's not good enough. You keep coming back. That's another sign of health anxiety. Eventually, you will have to get to that point to where you accept, and you're like, okay, I don't need to keep going back, because if you get caught up in that cycle and you never stop, it's hard to get out of health anxiety. Now, for me, I didn't have health insurance, so I didn't do this as much as other people, but my friends to the north in Canada and then my friends overseas, a lot of you have free health care, which I think overall is an amazing concept. But for health anxiety, I've actually coached people. I've had clients where I've had to tell them, look, this is not healthy. They're going to the ER, going to get checked out, or the A&E, whatever they call it, every single day. Every day. Imagine that. Because it turns out to be a comfort zone for them, and the reassurance doesn't last as long. Number 3, you're always getting tested for something. Like I said in the beginning, I didn't have an issue with this because I was scared to get tested because I didn't want to find out that I had something horrible. But eventually, I was getting tests all the freaking time. I was demanding tests. I was getting angry when I wouldn't be given tests. Initially, it was the hard stuff. So it was, like the EKG, the stress test, the echo, just constantly needing those tests because I just thought that they were missing something every freaking time. My EKG and my blood work and all that always came back perfect. But I kept going back because these symptoms never went away after I got positive test results. And I had a hard time, obviously, with acceptance. And I also lacked the knowledge about health anxiety or anxiety in general. So I didn't know about the subconscious, conscious, why symptoms happen, that symptoms can continue to linger on even if you get initial reassurance. And that's really why I love to coach, to give you that knowledge. So think about that. But I was constantly getting tests. And then, of course, it moved on to things like ultrasounds. And I was demanding CAT scans. My last bout with health anxiety, I thought I had lymphoma for it was about 1.5 to 2 years. And they kept denying me CAT scans. They kept denying me. Made me really, really upset. But eventually, that was, like I said, that was my last bout with health anxiety. And I finally came around to accepting. And then going to the doctors, I stopped doing that. I had to cut off that external reassurance because it didn't last, it didn't work. What was I missing? Internal reassurance. I needed to be able to tell me that I was okay and that was good enough. That brings me to number 4. You have a hard time trusting the doctors. Okay, and the reason I had a hard time trusting the doctors is because I would go to the doctors, they would tell me I'm fine, sometimes laugh at me, chuckle at me, blow me off, which is not going to help with trust, and it just makes me angry. A lot of doctors don't have bedside manner for people with anxiety, if you didn't know, or if you didn't notice. No, I've heard many stories of you guys going in and getting treated like crap, right? They almost get annoyed by how much we go in, but that doesn't help with trust. But then you go home, right? You sit on the couch, you just got told that you're fine, you're like, whew. Thank God, thank God, I got to get this anxiety under control, and I'm going to start changing this, and then your chest pain comes back, or whatever symptom you're primarily worried comes back, and you're like, see, they must have missed something. And then over time, this paranoia for doctors grows. Some of you have read articles about doctors misdiagnosing. Some of you have told me that, one of your family members got misdiagnosed, and then it escalated, and it was too late. If you're wired to negativity, you're going to start to automatically think that that's you. You're the small statistic. You're the one getting misdiagnosed no matter how many times you go back through. Some of you have been to the doctors hundreds of times and it still isn't good enough. So you obviously have a hard time trusting the doctors. Number 5, guys, you need constant reassurance that you're healthy. So like I said, going back to the doctors, but this isn't just with doctors. It's forums, constant Googling, constant vital checking, your friends. I had a mom that was a nurse, okay? She was a nurse, so bless her heart. I was calling her all the freaking time, asking for reassurance and guidance. Please tell me, Mom, everything's gonna be okay. And eventually I had to start cutting off these external reassurance sources, okay? So I had to stop calling my mom. I had to stop asking my friends if they had the symptoms. I had to stop going to the doctors, every time any symptom popped up. I had to stop Googling. I had to stop checking vitals. Again, I had to develop that internal reassurance and that inner voice that was able to tell my subconscious when I would have symptoms like, look, it's going to be okay, it's going to be fine, we're healthy, we've been checked, and I had to keep on drilling that home, and eventually it started to click, and I started to get better from there. Number 6, guys, You are extremely symptom focused, okay? So your anxiety obviously starts from negative thinking or a trauma or an adversity or a life change, but then you develop symptoms because it goes unresolved or just because the anxiety was so bad that you get physical symptoms. And then we transfer from having the root causes that started it to now I am just focused on the symptoms, right, that I've developed from the anxiety itself. And now I'm trying to work recovery backwards, and a lot of us get stuck here. I made a video about this the other day. Go check it out. Actually, 2 days ago, I made a video about this. Go look at it. I explain it more in depth. But it goes from the root causes to now symptoms, and we're constantly trying to work anxiety from the outside in when you have to really handle what started it to shut off the engine or the motor that causes the symptoms. So you're always focused on symptoms. It's symptom this, symptom that. And those people tend to not recover. Eventually, you have to get to a point where like, okay, anxiety causes these symptoms. I've gotten checked. I'm healthy. I don't need all this extra reassurance. The symptoms suck, but you have to go through a period of time where you're working on you. You're working on the root causes. You're working on being a positive person, handling adversities better, handling lifestyle changes, whatever it is, forgiving, moving past old traumas. You have to do that and be willing to accept that symptoms are going to happen in that process until your subconscious catches up to your conscious intentions. All right, number 7, you're hypersensitive, hyper-focused, or aware of all sensations. Guys, you're probably feeling things that the other average people, cannot even feel. I can't feel the things that I used to feel when I dealt with my health anxiety. You're extremely, extremely sensitive to these symptoms, okay? Now, I'll just go ahead and tell you, these symptoms are real. What you are feeling is real, and 90% of them, they're caused by muscle tension. But here's the thing, when you're wired to negativity, okay, and you're extremely sensitive to symptoms, it's like your pain threshold goes down. So a lot of you are having these symptoms. You can't pick them up on a blood test or an MRI, a CAT scan, an EKG. You can't pick those things up usually. But you are so negative and sensitive, you catastrophize this, just like you catastrophize other situations. And it gets worse and worse. We are told when we were little, right? At least most of us were taught this, that if we're negative or if we cry or if we whine, etc., about a cut or an injury, it feels worse. It gets worse, Now we're just putting a lot of focus on it, and it gets worse, and we're being negative about it. We don't have to cry about it. I rarely cried during health anxiety. I was too scared to cry, but I was really focused. I was hyper aware of everything going on. I'd feel everything. I'd see my heartbeat in my stomach flip out, think I had a horrible blood pressure problem. I'd hear my pulse in my ear very loudly when I put my head on the pillow at night. I could feel my pulse and tell my pulse without even touching here. I could just feel it in my chest, and it would escalate from there. I could just, tell you the number immediately. I could always guess my blood pressure. I would feel every bubble and gurgle in my stomach and catastrophize that. It was really, really bad. So I was extremely sensitive and hyper-focused, guys, like many of you are. Number 8, guys, you constantly check your heart rate. Now, I'm going to tell you, at rest, my heart rate during my anxiety days, on average, I'd have to say anywhere from like 95 to 100 all the way up to like 115 to 125-ish. And that's at rest. I'm not talking about being asleep. I'm talking about like sitting here on the couch. That's what it was constantly. If I had a lot of anxiety or symptoms, especially panic, it'd get up to the 150, 160, all the way up to 180, okay? And I had that for years and nothing happened to my heart. But you need to make sure initially you get that initial reassurance from a doctor that you are healthy, that your heart is fine. And after that, you have to move forward and accept it. The heart is a very resilient muscle. It's very strong. It's very tough. It can handle a lot of things. So your heart rate occasionally getting up like that, it's not really dangerous, okay, as long as you've gotten the initial reassurance. But my heart rate was horrible, so I would always constantly check it. Now, these days you have these fancy watches, you got apps, pulse monitor, the finger deal. I was old school. I just checked like this. So if you were looking at me back in the day when I had health anxiety, probably within a 5-minute span, I probably would do this like 2 or 3 times. I'm just being real. When I'm driving, I'm checking it. Sometimes I check my wrist, just try to play it off cool, like nothing, to hide it or whatever. But eventually I got to the point where I wasn't even trying to hide it. Oh, I'm just checking my pulse. And my fingers would just stay here. So if you're doing that, eventually you're going to have to get away from that. These are like negative habits, little tics that you get from your health anxiety. Eventually I had to force myself to stop checking my heart rate. It is a choice that you can make. Number 9, you constantly check your blood pressure. So I'll go ahead and give you some reassurance on blood pressure. My blood pressure on average was anywhere from 130 to 145-ish, sometimes 150 at rest, okay? Over about 95 to 100 to 105. Very high numbers, and this is in my early 20s. from like 19 to like 24, 25-ish, okay? Those are my numbers constantly, all right? Anytime I'd go check. Now, whenever I would have panic attacks, it'd get up into the 170, 180, over 110, 115. Crazy numbers. You look up those numbers online, they're going to all tell you heart attack. You got a heart problem. You got horrible hypertension. You know, and actually a lot of doctors are giving out blood pressure medicine like candy, even though these people don't have blood pressure problems. They're healthy, you know. They're strong as an ox. Their body is completely fine. They're just dealing with anxiety. But they're being given hypertension medicine. But I would check my blood pressure multiple times. I'd drive to Walgreens or Walmart to even get it checked. It was a horrible problem. Another vicious cycle that I got caught up in. Another form of external reassurance. I was never happy when I checked my blood pressure. Heck, there were a few times where it was really low and it was like concerning. Just like, and I'll go back with the heart rate. There were a few times that my heart rate was in like the upper 50s and I was like, is my heart just going to stop? So I would think that about my heart rate and blood pressure. I was never happy. It was either too low or too high. Most of the time, too high. So you got to get away from checking that. And before I move on to the next one, if you have an Apple Watch, if you have these apps, delete the apps. Let a family member have your Apple Watch or whatever you're using to check your heart rate. You got to get away from that. You got to get away from checking your blood pressure unless a doctor has ordered you to check it. All right. Number 10, you constantly check your oxygen levels. Now, this is the big one lately. Why? It should be easy. The pandemic. Difficulty breathing is one of the main symptoms. So everybody is becoming like breathing conscious. My video on difficulty breathing has like skyrocketed since the pandemic hit. So everybody's worried about getting this virus. So your brain starts to mimic some of these symptoms, like it does with whatever disease or illness or sickness you're fearing. Your brain can mimic this stuff. And now you're getting worried about your oxygen levels. So a lot of people went out and bought oxygen monitors or whatever. You put it on their finger, it'll tell your pulse, and it'll give you the oxygen amount. Most of the time when you're checking your oxygen, you're getting at normal levels or even higher because of the hyperventilation. You're actually usually taking in more oxygen than even another average healthy person, believe it or not. I would get that anytime they check my pulse. My oxygen would be extremely high, and they'd be like, oh man, your oxygen level, yeah, that's because I'm like over here hyperventilating. So don't be checking your oxygen levels. If you've gotten tested, you don't have the virus or whatever, you know, you need to get the initial reassurance, like I said, but you got to move on from there. Checking your pulse, your blood pressure, and your oxygen levels all day, not healthy. You're not convincing your subconscious that you're okay and that you're healthy and you're moving on, so therefore you're not going to heal or recover. Number 11, you constantly self-examine your body. This is another big one. If you look hard enough, you're going to find something. And with some of you, you'll notice that your eyes are actually playing tricks on you. Something's going to look bigger than what it really is. You're going to start worrying about your veins. You know, why are they this color? Are they popping out too much? Are my eyes dilated? You know, are my pupils dilated? Is my lymph nodes look bigger on this side or this side? I constantly got into this, especially when I started worrying about lymphoma. I was like constantly fiddling around. But by the way, don't mess with your lymph nodes. It makes them swell up and take on more fluid. So don't do it. I did that a lot. So that it would actually swell up from that. But I was always worried about lumps and bumps during my lymphoma stuff. I was convinced that I had lymphoma and that it was spreading in my body. So if you're self-examining, that's just as much of a problem as the heart rate, the blood pressure, oxygen levels. Now be smart. Every few months, there's nothing wrong with looking over your body to be safe, right? That's just common sense. But if you're doing it multiple times a day, every time you take a shower, again, you have to let go of that and move forward. Let's see here. By the way, if you're with me so far, leave a comment down below and say, I will recover from anxiety, okay? Let me see how many people are with me so far. Let's go to the next one, guys. Number 12, you are scared to go to the doctor. Now, like I said, in the end, like the second half of, well, let's say the last 2/3 of my health anxiety, I was going all the time, constant reassurance, constant testing. But in the beginning, I was actually scared to go to the doctor to get told that there was something wrong, right? I was so terrified of getting that devastating news. Here's the thing. You need to get the initial reassurance. Worst case scenario, something is wrong with you. Now you have that closure. You can move forward, and now you can treat it. Really, it was really silly of me to not go. So take that stand, take that step, do it faster than I did so this thing doesn't escalate, because actually you're doing more harm than good by not going. You think that you're protecting yourself from having this horrible event happen, but all you're doing, since you have a lack of closure, your anxiety and your uncertainty is getting worse, right? You're fearing the unknown. So go get that initial closure, initial reassurance, excuse me. The next one, number 13, you have white coat syndrome. And usually this develops, especially if you have like cardiophobia, or when you go to the doctor, you get some really bad numbers, right, with your heart rate or your blood pressure. This is usually what this is about. And from then on, you've developed this association, and your numbers are high basically because your anxiety goes up because you fear getting high numbers. Guys, this lasted me years. Probably it was the last thing to go. I mean, I'm getting out of my car, walking into the doctor's office, and my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure goes up, and then I'm getting horrible numbers. Talking about worse than even the bad numbers I get whenever I was at rest. They would just sky freaking rocket. So some of you have this. It's very common with health anxiety. And it didn't help when the doctor's like, hey, your heart rate's really high, your blood pressure's really high, is this running your family? Do you have any conditions? And you're like, no, should I be concerned? I just have anxiety, and it just flips you out. But white coat syndrome for me was one of the last things to go. It's a very strong association. The best thing to do with that is just to accept it for what it is. Let the doctor know, yeah, my numbers get higher, and then gradually over time, this association will break down just like others will, as long as you're working, exposing yourself, etc., and fixing other areas of your life and the root causes. Number 14, you constantly think about death. Okay, this is a constant thing for me, obviously. I was thinking about my funeral. I was thinking about, at the time she was my girlfriend and fiance, but now she's my wife. I was thinking, how she was going to handle life after me. I had a stepson, another kid on the way at the time. I now have 3, but I was worried about them. I was thinking about making like video logs. This is whenever I was fearing lymphoma. When in my earlier days with health anxiety, I was so upset. I was like, oh, I'm going to die at the age of 21. What a shame. I had so much more life to live. I always thought about my obituary. I always thought about what it was going to feel like. And then I started having some existential anxiety where I was wondering about what life after death was going to be like. I am a believer that there's life after death, you know what I mean? Like there's an afterlife, but the uncertainty of what that was going to be like and the process always plagued me. I just thought a lot about death, and that's the elephant in the room, right, guys? You have this new awakened fear of death, so it's always in the forefront of your mind or the top priority of your subconscious. You eventually do have to overcome that. So I'll try to remember to link at the end of this video, I overcame the fear of death by using it as motivation instead of it being a negative obsession, okay? So I'll put that video at the end. I know I'm not promised tomorrow. I know one day I'm going to leave this planet. I'll no longer try to control that. I'm going to save my fear for that day. I'm going to live every day to my fullest, if that makes any sense. You're not going to catch that and grasp that quick. It takes time. It's a process. Number 15, you go from disease scare to disease scare. For me, it was like the heart stuff, and then it was like stomach, colon cancer, then it was throat cancer, then it was lymphoma, and a lot of other ones I'm leaving out, blood clots, strokes, and somehow I was overcoming all of these diseases, right? And I would just bounce to another one because I never handled my fear of death, dying, and disease, and my subconscious would deliver new symptoms. So now I'm going on Google, I'm searching, and I'm going to find out something about this disease and assume that that's what's going on with me because I'm still wired to negativity. So you see how important it is to work everything, to change your whole life, to fix the root causes, fix the motor that's driving this, because your subconscious will find a new set of symptoms to get your attention. That's the only way that your subconscious can talk to you. So you bounce from disease to disease. Even though you get some reassurance and you accept one, there's another one lurking around that you haven't been scared of yet. So I always call it graduating to new symptoms or graduating to new diseases. Number 16. Reassurance doesn't last as long anymore. In the beginning, you get told that you're healthy and fine. Maybe it lasts a few days, a week or two. Some of you are lucky, a couple months. But lately, you're going to the doctor, and within a few minutes, you're having symptoms, or you're basically at this point to where you want them to tell you that something is wrong so you can get fixed, okay? So reassurance over time, it's like you become addicted to it, right? And it doesn't last. In my Facebook group, which is down below, people ask reassurance on symptoms, and I get hundreds of people saying, look, it's this, or I have that too. Wow, you're not alone. Hundreds of people. And then the next day, they're asking again. So that reassurance, even though like 200 people that have health anxiety, let you know that they have it too, the next day, you're already needing that reassurance again. So it obviously doesn't last. Reassurance, external reassurance, is like motivation. It only lasts a little while. Okay, number 17, you're scared to exercise. This is a big one, okay? Especially if you have things like cardiophobia, where you're scared of your heart, you know, and the symptoms of that. I was always scared for my heart rate to get too high, my blood pressure to get too high, so it kept me from exercising for the longest freaking time and kept me from starting the process of recovering. You know, and I was taking away one of the best tools for anxiety, in my opinion, and that's exercise. I needed it. I was going into fight or flight a lot, and my body actually wanted to fight or run away, okay? So I started giving my body eventually what it wanted. A little key tip with exercise, as long as you've been cleared by a doctor, one of the biggest issues I had was I slowly started to exercise, so I'd always taught myself out of it, okay? So eventually I figured out, for me, the recipe was to just go hardcore, match the intensity of my fight or flight, and then I could get over my panic or my symptoms or my racing thoughts or negative thoughts very, very quickly. So exercise, you can harness that, use it, and it also started to reassure me that I was healthy. If I can do this workout, then I don't have this cancer, I don't have this disease, or I don't have a heart problem. Eventually became this mass weapon that I used to defeat my health anxiety. But you're scared to exercise, sometimes even go up flights of stairs or do anything strenuous. Number 18, you fear your panic is something more. So towards the end of my anxiety, I really wasn't fearing my panic as much anymore, especially the biggest turning point was when I started to exercise. And I was like, okay, if this is a heart problem, you know, I would have died by now. So when I finally got over my cardiophobia, I would still have panic attacks, but I could handle them. I knew some coping mechanisms. I had some tools to use. But in the beginning, I thought my panic was a heart attack just about every time, or a stroke, or a seizure. Those three things, mainly heart attacks. Every single time was equally as scary as the first, it seemed like. My first one was long and it was new, but I always was irrational whenever my mind started to race and panic, and then my body would follow suit with all the symptoms. Panic attacks are terrifying. Some of you with health anxiety don't really have many, but most of you do have panic attacks, and I was always fearing sudden or instant death at that point. But once I finally found out that there was nothing wrong with my heart, my panic just was panic. It was uncomfortable, I didn't like it, but I didn't fear that I was about to drop dead. Number 19, we're getting close, guys. Nighttime is especially hard, and the reason it's really hard for people that deal with health anxiety is because, like I mentioned earlier, we are very hyper-aware, self-aware, hyper-focused, whatever you want to call it, sensitive to everything that's going on in our body. Well, at nighttime, first off, there's this negative, there's like this weird negative association with darkness, right? We associate negativity with darkness, and at night it's dark, so there's that. I'll just get that out of the way. But our loved ones, our friends, usually they're getting sleep, you know, more peacefully, and we're sitting there worried, so we don't have that form of external reassurance. Can't really talk to a doctor unless you go to the ER, right, at night, and I had many of those ER visits. One night I spent the night at an ER just so I could get in there if I was going to have a heart attack. It's usually quieter. There's not as many things going on. You're not as distracted. Heck, you can't even really find anything good on TV. It's just quiet, so you're laying there, obviously you're trying to get sleep, and when you're really quiet and still, you feel everything. If you have tremors, twitching, chest pain, heart rate, blood pressure, every little freaking thing I would feel at night. Nighttime would seem to be a nightmare for me. Obviously you need to have a morning and an evening schedule or routine. I have videos on that. I go over, that's something I actually help you develop with my coaching program. You need that morning and evening routine, super freaking important, but you have to change the way that you view nighttime. If you're worried about not getting sleep and your anxiety being bad at night, of course it's going to happen. Anxiety is going to do the opposite of what you want it to do. If you want it to leave you alone at night, it's going to get worse. So you almost have to embrace it and ask it to get worse, because in the end, you have to face that time. But many of you have developed these associations with night as being like a dreaded time, a nightmare when your symptoms come up, and you're caught up in that. So you need a morning and evening routine. They feed off of each other, and you got to start changing your perspective on anxiety as a whole, but in particular, some of these micro situations like night, right? Or if you get into a car and that's when your anxiety goes up, or if you get anxiety whenever you eat whenever you eat food, or just a certain time of the day, whatever your triggers are. You have to face those things eventually. Number 20, okay, last but not least, and I'm going to go into the bonus for those of you that stuck around. You have a hard time wrapping your mind around the fact that anxiety can cause all of these symptoms. And I think this is, God, I struggled with this pretty much the whole time. A lot of you have dealt with anxiety off and on throughout your life, right? Maybe you had it as a child. Maybe you didn't know what it was at the time, but now you're like, oh yeah, I had anxiety. Many of you have had performance anxiety. Many of you have had the jitters, or you've gotten butterflies in your stomach, or had some general fears and worries. But they never cause symptoms like this. So you're like, you know what? I've been told I've been an anxious person, a fearful person my whole life, you know, and I've had anxiety, but this is not that. Like this is so real. And these symptoms, again, are real. You're just sensitive to them. And you have this hard time wrapping your mind around the fact that anxiety can cause hundreds, if not thousands, of these symptoms and sensations, okay? So something important to do is to start accepting and believing. And it takes time. It's hard. It's not easy. But whenever I finally came to the conclusion, look, this is after tons of research of all these symptoms. That's why I have so many symptom videos on this channel. I was like, okay, this can be caused by anxiety. And that acceptance helped me, okay? So many of you are struggling with that still, especially in the initial stages. Number 21, the bonus one. Your symptoms change after overcoming a fear of an individual disease, okay? So I had the first initial fear of cardiophobia. But since I didn't change my lifestyle, since I didn't handle the things that started my anxiety, I had a random stomach pain one day. To this day, I don't know if it was caused by anxiety, if I just had a random stomach pain. I then put too much focus into it. I thought I had conquered my anxiety after I overcame my cardiophobia with the exercise. I was like, oh, thank you. I'm done with this. I'm not looking back. Then I had a pain, and since I didn't fix my life, I didn't fix my lifestyle, I didn't fix my root causes, I definitely didn't fix my fear of death and dying and disease, I automatically, once again, assumed the worst, and then I started to fear colon cancer and stomach cancer. And then, like I said, then it was throat cancer, then it was lymphoma, okay? Again, these symptoms are messages from your subconscious mind begging you to change and to make adjustments. If you don't pick up on those and you just get over that fear of that disease, your subconscious will find a new set of symptoms to deliver to you to get your attention. So start picking up on that and start making those necessary changes. But again, guys, that's total 21 signs that you could be a hypochondriac or have health anxiety. Again, please get diagnosed by a professional. Now, I have tons of tips, and there's a lot of links down below in the description. Check all that stuff out. Start being proactive towards your anxiety, please. And this is possible to overcome as long as you work hard, okay? You have to work hard. Patience, consistency, strategy. That's what I teach with my coaching program. So that information is down below in the description and in the first spin comment. Remember to like this video. If you're new to the channel, thank you for sticking around, which, you know, if you stuck around this whole time, let's put down, I watched it all. How about that? Something basic. I watched the whole thing, or I watched it all. Just let me know. I want to know who my true ride or die subscribers are. Which brings me to this. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the notification bell so you get updates when I put this, whenever I put videos out. And leave a comment down below. You know, let everybody know which signs you have. You know, if you want to talk about symptoms or just share your story, you're welcome to do that. But guys, until next time, keep fighting. I'm going to keep on rolling and pumping these videos out. So start, you know, coming back to the channel every day. Eventually, I'm thinking about upping it to 2 uploads a day, 1 early morning, 1 evening. I'll make an announcement before I make that change. So it's important that you hit the bell and you get the notifications. But I love you guys. Keep fighting. This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I did overcome it, okay? But I love you all, and I'll talk to you next time.